Perhaps one day I'll hit the lotto, then my bills would all be paid. Money no longer would be a bother. My life would never be the same. We could travel all around this world, fly first class every day. But if I never hit the lotto, would you still love me anyway? Perhaps one day I'll reach the big time. The whole world would know my name. Well, every other magazine cover would use me for their campaign. We would be the hardest couple around, from New York to LA. But if I never reach the big time, would you still love me anyway? Perhaps one day I'll have the answers for every question that's ever been. Most brilliant minds of our time will call me colleague and friend. We would never have any problems at all. I'd solve them each right away. But if I never have the answers, would you still love me anyway? Oh, if I never hit the lotto or reach the big time one day, oh, if I never have the answers, would you still love me? Would you still love me anyway? Perhaps one day I'll reach the big time. The whole world would know my name. Well, every other magazine cover would use me for their campaign. We would be the hardest couple around, from New York to LA. But if I never reach the big time, well, I'm happy on my own, making coffee just for one, and eating breakfast all alone. Fewer dishes to be done, I'm never running behind. You're never on my mind. No longer there to make me comb my hair, fix my tie, or kiss me goodbye. Swear I'm happy on my own. No one to worry where I am, or waiting for me to come home. Staying up till 3 a.m. I'm always out on the town. You're nowhere to be found. And when our song comes on, I just hum along and order another round. I'm happy on my own, making coffee just for one, and eating breakfast all alone. Fewer dishes to be done. I'm never running behind. You're never on my mind. No longer there to make me comb my hair, fix my tie, or kiss me goodbye. Swear I'm happy on my own. No one to worry where I am, or waiting for me to come home. Staying up till 3 a.m. I'm always out on the town. You're nowhere to be found. And when our song comes on, I just hum along and order another round. I'm happy on my own, making coffee just for one, and eating breakfast all alone. Fewer dishes to be done. I'm never running behind. You're never on my mind. No longer there to make me comb my hair, fix my tie, or kiss me goodbye. Swear I'm happy on my own. No one to worry where I am, or waiting for me to come home. Staying up till 3 a.m. I'm always out on the town. You're nowhere to be found. And when our song comes on, I just hum along and order another round. I'm happy on my own, making coffee just for one, and eating breakfast all alone. Fewer dishes to be done. I'm never running behind. You're never on my mind. No longer there to make me comb my hair, fix my tie, or kiss me goodbye. Swear I'm happy on my own. No one to worry where I am, or waiting for me to come home. Staying up till 3 a.m. I'm always out on the town. You're nowhere to be found. When our song comes on, I just hum along and order another round. I'm happy on my own, making coffee just for one, and eating breakfast all alone. Fewer dishes to be done. I'm never running behind. You're never on my mind. No longer there to make me comb my hair, fix my tie, or kiss me goodbye. Swear I'm happy on my own. No one to worry where I am, or waiting for me to come home. Staying up till 3 a.m. I'm always out on the town. You're nowhere to be found. And when our song comes on, I just hum along and order another round. I'm happy on my own, making coffee just for one, and eating breakfast all alone. Fewer dishes to be done. I'm never running behind. You're never on my mind. No longer there to make me comb my hair, fix my tie, or kiss me goodbye. Swear I'm happy on my own. No one to worry where I am, up till 3 a.m. I'm always out on the town. You're nowhere to be found. And when our song comes on, I just hum along and order another round. I'm happy on my own, at least most of the time. I guess some of the time, maybe none of the time, I'm happy, happy on my own.
I don't wanna be lonely when winter is freezing and trees start to bolt. And I don't wanna be sitting alone in a room that's just filled with my soul. And so I came to this place, I'm looking for a familiar face, and that's when I saw you. 'Cause you don't know me and I don't know you, but it breaks my heart. You're looking so blue on the last of the year. I just picked your name on the coffee cup, but a stroke of luck, the guy just messed up and gave your cup to me. Swapping our cups, and after a while we're swapping a glance. And I can't think nothing better than started a year with a drop of romance. 'Cause I came to this place looking for a familiar face, and that's when I met you. 'Cause you don't know me and I don't know you, but it breaks my heart. You're looking so blue on the first of the year. I just picked your name on the coffee cup, with a stroke of luck, the guy just messed up and gave your cup to me. Is what matters me, the way you came toward me, dragging your feet, and I just smiled at you. winter is freezing and trees start to bolt, and I don't wanna be sitting alone in a room that's just filled with my soul. And so I came to this place, I'm looking for a familiar face, and that's when I saw you. 'Cause you don't know me and I don't know you, but it breaks my heart. You looking so blue on the last of the year. I just picked your name on the coffee cup, but a stroke of luck, the guy just messed up and gave your cup to me. Swapping our cups, and after a while we're swapping a glass. And I can't think nothing better than started a year with a drop of romance. 'Cause I came to this place looking for a familiar face, and that's when I met you. 'Cause you don't know me and I don't know you, but it breaks my heart. You're looking so blue on the first of the year. I just picked your name on the coffee cup, with a stroke of luck, the guy just messed up and gave your cup to me. Cappuccino is what matters me. The way you came toward me, dragging your feet, and I just smiled at you. Winter is freezing and trees start to bolt, and I don't wanna be sitting alone in a room that's just filled with my soul. And so I came to this place, I'm looking for a familiar face, and that's when I saw you. 'Cause you don't know me and I don't know you, but it breaks my heart. You're looking so blue on the last of the year. I just picked your name on the coffee cup, but a stroke of luck, the guy just messed up and gave your cup to me. Swapping our cups, and after a while we're swapping a glass. And I can't think nothing better than started a year with a drop of romance. 'Cause I came to this place looking for a familiar face, and that's when I met you. 'Cause you don't know me and I don't know you, but it breaks my heart. You're looking so blue on the first of the year. I just picked your name on the coffee cup. With a stroke of luck, the guy just messed up and gave your cup to me. A dark cappuccino is what matters me. The way you came toward me, dragging your feet, and I just smiled at you. And I don't wanna be lonely when winter is freezing and twisted.